Okay, hi everybody. It's Savraj Aura here from the Distro Boss Podcast. I'm on with Tyler Townsend. He's an expert in shipping and customs. It's an interesting space. We're here to talk about getting into business. Well, it's all things entrepreneurial, but really it's all about how you can really quit your job and get into business. And we're going to explore that here in this conversation. Tyler, why don't you start off by telling us a bit about, I guess, your business and also like what got you into starting your company?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much for having me on. So I've been doing this for 15 years now, just shy of 15 years, I'd say, and it has been a whirlwind. I started as an apprentice, did literally worked for almost nothing, um, uh, and just learned all I could. What got me into it? I was fed up with the job I had. If I'm honest, I worked at Sports Direct and didn't want to do that anymore. So I got an apprenticeship, and just my first role in the industry, my boss at the time, who I still consider as a mentor for me, he gave me the HMRC guidebook and said, "You've got to read this. You must know it word for word."
HMRC, that's Revenue and Customs, right? His Majesty.
Yes.
I was about to say Her
Yeah,
Majesty. His
his
Majesty's Revenue and
Majesty.
Customs. It's like the IRS
Yes.
in the US.
Yeah, and I got this book and I started reading it, and what I didn't realize was he was just doing a bit of hazing, as they do, just having a bit of a laugh with me. But I read the book. I read it cover to cover, and I learned as much as I could. Don't
Did
get
you
me
what?
wrong.
You
I
understood
don't.
the tax code. They gave you.
So I understand a lot of it, but
Yeah.
I've got a very good memory on things like that. So it served me well in jobs from then. So I went into other roles where companies were setting up areas of business working with HMRC and other tax authorities. And the good thing was, where I'd read the book, I was able to go, I know where to look for that. I know what to do. And I just built from there. And I I worked for someone during the start of the EU and the UK's kind of breakup. And as much as I was
This
working
is
with
Brexit,
them,
right?
yes, I try to steer away from using the terminology Brexit. You hear it everywhere. So
Yeah.
what I try to do is make it a bit more like it is, which is
The
it was a
uncoupling.
divorce. It was a divorce and a half.
Yeah.
And we did everything we could with staff, and we built this thing. But I found that my hands were tied on everything I needed to do, and I every time I put an idea forward, I said, "This is a brilliant idea. This is how we can make some money. This is how we can help other businesses." And it was a case of, well, we'll put that in the meeting next week or the week after, and it was always deferring any project idea. So I decided I'm going to stop lining other people's pockets and I'm going to do it for myself.
Yeah.
And I just sat down one day with a friend of mine, and we started jotting down ideas of what we were going to call the company and what we were going to do. And it was just we're doing this because we've got these brilliant ideas and no one's listening.
Yeah.
And that's how we started the business. It
So
was
this is the
just,
same space. This is the same
yeah,
industry. So they're not listening to you. You've got so much sort of value to offer, and it's kind of like we've got this hierarchy. You shush in a corner. This isn't your time to speak. Is that kind of what it is?
pretty much, yeah, it was like that. And it was difficult. And I just, I went at it. I thought, "Do you know what? I'm just going to do it." My friend went online, set up the business for me, so I didn't have to worry about it. A week later, we're going to speak to clients. We're doing what we can to
So you've
help these
literally just
people.
gone onto like one of those online platforms where it's like, hey, set your company up, pay this like the bronze, silver, gold package. Let's just
Yeah,
start a business, get an email domain, that kind of thing. And it's just like you're now in, you're ready to rock and roll.
exactly that. I didn't have a clue what we were doing. Didn't understand VAT, corporation tax, or anything like that. But do you know what? Threw ourselves at it. Um, Biggest mistake we could have made.
Oh yeah.
And I will say that to anyone who asks, it was the biggest mistake we could have made because we didn't speak to my boss. My boss at the time was the owner of the business, and we did it behind his back. And my biggest regret was I should have told him I was doing it, and the reason why, because he was not just my employer, but he was a friend of mine, and he no longer talks to me in the same manner as what we used to. So I broke down a friendship because I didn't communicate. And I think, had I have, 3 years ago, had I have told him what I wanted to do and how I wanted to achieve the goals of the business and what I wanted to, he might have been on board, or he might have said, now's your time to do it. And we could have parted ways a bit nicer than we did. So first bit of advice I can give anyone is communicate.
I think a lot of people could probably resonate. I know I certainly did when you said that about like, you being in a boardroom and you trying to like, offer ideas and just generally value for a company and say, look, this is where personally, your personal ambition is like, this is your moment to shine. You've got a great idea. Let me share it with everybody. And I know this is good for the business. So it can only be seen as like a good thing that I'm doing. And then suddenly every time you try and take that step forward, you're getting blocked and it feels so like unfulfilling. Right. And then
it does. I think the biggest problem that you can find with that is as well that boardrooms are blinkered. And I can say that I've sat on quite a few boards. I imagine you have as well. And boardrooms, they have an agenda. Everyone on the board has an agenda, and that's all they see is where I want to be. And the problem is when people come on and go, I've got this fantastic idea that can get you to where you want to be, but quicker. And they go, no, I must do this, and it does damper spirits of a lot of people. And I think that's what pushes so many companies to be formed, because they're fed up with almost the oppressors of the boardroom stopping them from achieving their goals.
Yeah. And it's like, as soon as you go against the grain, but then you're very quickly stepping on people's toes, right? Because where on one, in the beginning, you're on their side, even if you were kept in the back, you're on their side. Suddenly, when you go out on your own, now you're essentially a competitor, especially if you're working in the same space, right? And even if you're not working in the same space, and I've seen people sort of offshoot into other things, your previous co-workers could still probably look at you with a bit of disdain. It's like, oh, you went alone. You had the gusto to go ahead and do it. You had the foresight to take steps in that direction. How come you never shared that with us? And there's all that kind of stuff that goes into it too.
Yeah, and I set up the business, and I think it was 2 weeks after setting up the business, all of a sudden a letter from a lawyer appeared at my door, and I was being sued for IP theft and anything they could do to affect me. They tried. And
wait, were these called undertakings? Were these the
the legal undertakings? And you can't solicit work from us, you can't do this. And I looked at it, and the first thing I said was, have I made a mistake?
Yeah.
And I sat down with my partner, and I was an emotional wreck of I want to do it by myself. I want to win. I want to achieve something. But in the background, I've got a lawsuit I've got to fight now. How can I do this?
Yeah.
And she sat with me and she said, just go with it. Just go with the flow. Just keep going forward and almost forget it's happened. And 6 months later, the lawsuit's over. It was more, I think, as a scare tactic to make me go away. And I decided I'm not going away. It was settled before it got to that point. I am very appreciative of the law firm that I brought on board, and anyone who asks me for a good employment lawyer, I always recommend this guy. And he did everything he could, and he talked me through every step. Even a case of, I'm sending an email today, he would tell me what he was doing so that I understood what was happening, because he knew that I was scared that I've made a terrible mistake. And even he said, you haven't. You're doing what you set out to do. I always said, before I went to work for this company, I always said the next job I have will be for me. It won't be for working for anyone else. I will do this for me. And then I went to work for someone else because it was a good idea, and I put my own ambition on hold. And then I decided, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do it for me. And there are lots of regrets, but that was probably the biggest one, was that I didn't speak to my friend at the time. And yeah, they did fight back hard for months. And for months, I had people speaking to me of, what are you doing? Why is it that you're not marketing your business? Why is it you're not emailing people? And it was a case of, I'm just going to work with what I've got, because I'm scared to go to the market. I'm scared to do anything that's going to upset what is already a turbulent time.
And had you given up your IP, and you had to give up your, I guess, a lot of your marketing material and whatever? Is that what? Yep. So you kind of like, I have a similar story. When I used to work in recruitment, and one of the companies I used to work for was a big one. I think they're still as big as they used to be. Hayes Recruitment, and I went alone. I did the same sort of thing. I decided to set up my own recruitment company. And I mean, my version of the story is like super funny, because I was playing like a really like it was a really popular game at the time. It was called World of Warcraft, and one of the weapons and one of the characters I used to play was a mace, and I decided to call this thing Mace Recruitment. So when I pictured mace, I was thinking about this strong weapon. So that kind of like, that's going to be my company. It's going to be this strong company. Turns out there's a consultancy or a construction consultancy firm called Mace Construction, and they also happen to have an internal recruitment arm called Mace Resourcing. And so my Mace recruitment company got undertakings sent by one of the biggest construction companies in the UK. And of course, I was providing my recruiting efforts were for building building managers and facilities management staff. So I was tapping into the construction and property space, and yeah, very quickly running this company from my bedroom. I was still living at my dad's at the time. So from my bedroom in my boxer shorts with the Xbox on, running a recruitment company, just sending ads out, getting candidates coming in, finding opportunities, and kind of just sending candidates off and hoping to get some people saying, yeah, we want some guys in for interview. And before I know it, I'm suddenly getting big letters in the mail. I've got emails coming through. This is, you'll be receiving undertakings in the mail. This is an email to let you know that you're basically being sued. And it's like very quickly, they were demanding all the web IP that I had, all the print media that I had created, any contacts that I'd made, any earnings. They wanted all that too, any money that I'd made from placing candidates in construction property. And I ended up reaching out directly to the head of legal at Mace. I said, listen, guys, I'm running this out of a bedroom. I just started. You gotta let me off the hook. So thankfully they were understanding. I explained my entire reasoning and rationale behind the name, and they kind of found it funny. And they ended up saying, all right, we're just going to pull back. I didn't even have to go and I didn't get my own lawyers at the time. I probably should have, because apparently someone told me that they had to prove loss of earnings because they're not a recruitment company, they're a construction company. But that was my first forte. But as you were telling that story, I was like, yeah, I've got something similar. And it's scary.
But it is that worry, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. It's that first time doing anything on my own and getting this legal document. And my business partner said that it's a rite of passage. Getting one of those documents is a rite of passage, that you've done enough to get onto someone's radar. But hell, I could have done without that to set up the business. But you're right, I had to surrender client lists. Well, I say I had to. My lawyer fought that, and in the end I didn't have to surrender the IP, but it was legal undertakings to say I would never go after their clients, I'd never do anything. And it's where it ended in the end. It was a case of, right, let's take out a lot of the legal problem, and let's just sign this document that says you're not going to chase our staff or our customers.
Yeah. So that's a pretty big early on obstacle. Like, you just get started and it's like whack. You can't continue. I feel like a lot of people don't realize that when they get into business. They think their first obstacles are going to be maybe just money issues, time issues. They're chasing the end of the month. Like they've got rent to pay. So their only concern is, how do I make enough money to meet my obligations financially? And then people don't always recognize the fact that as soon as you do go into business, you've got, everyone's looking at you like it's lunchtime. So, if you've got a situation where you've crossed the line somewhere, where you've inadvertently crossed the line, you haven't realized you've done it. Or if you've done it thinking that it was okay to do, before you know it, you could be in some hot water. Even if you're not legally in a situation where you're actually going to get any serious penalty from it, sometimes it's just the legal battle itself, and that could wipe out your finances. Like paying for that lawyer, like how much was that? Was that something that was,
a lot of money?
Startup costs?
Yeah, well, it was a lot of money. And about 4 years beforehand, I had a car accident, and I had the money from the claim, and I kid you not, 99% of that went on the startup of the company, as well as fighting this battle. And I didn't take a salary for the first 4 or 5 months. I was living on the fact that my partner was working, and don't get me wrong, she was not appreciative of the fact that I wasn't bringing in an income, but it was the only way to progress the business. And then to have that fight as well and throw money at that meant that I couldn't build this massive dream and empire that I had in the beginning. But it also taught me a valuable lesson, not only to communicate, but everyone, I think, when they go into business, they say to themselves, I have a dream and I'm going to do it. you want to rush it because you want to do it. And it meant I had to take my time and actually think about what I was doing a bit more, because I didn't want to tread on people's toes. And I also didn't want to cause any harm with bringing a new client on board that might happen somewhere along the lines to have ties with another company. And it meant I could shape the future of the business around being cautious. And I think that served us better, having that cautious approach, than the child in me of going, I want it and I want it now.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I had this question that I was going to save for later, but I feel like it's more fitting now, because it's like, you just mentioned like your partner was like, unappreciative of you having not bringing any money in. You've just started this company. You suddenly had a legal battle that you weren't expecting. You're still not pulling in any money. So how do you keep, and it's like I said, this was going to be like way later, but I think it's fitting now. Like, how do you keep believing in yourself? Because, how do you keep believing in yourself as an entrepreneur, and also in your business plan? Because there's two different things there. There's the concept of like being able to like stand on your own 2 feet and go it alone. And then there's the plan that you currently have. Like, is this plan the one that's going to work? And it's like, if you got to stick to your guns, how do you maintain that? How do you keep doing that and still chase that money, still chase those contacts, still like pivot, while also kind of balancing the family, or, the spouse or partner that you have at home?
It was difficult, to say the least. And I actually, obviously, you mentioned that question in an email to me, and I sat down with my partner and I said, this is a question that I'm going to be asked, and how would you answer it? Because that's the answer, really, is I had the support around me. Everyone was helping me that could help me, and everyone knew what was going on, because I was quite open about it. I've made a terrible mistake in terms of I've stepped on toes that I shouldn't have stepped on. And also, I remember a day very early on, and I think it answers the question very well. I remember a day very early on that my first employee that I brought on board made a mistake that cost me as the company around £50,000. Now, for a startup, that is a lot of money to lose. And I remember my partnerships I was building, one of the companies came to me and sent me a really angry email of, we're going to have to look for a different partner because of these mistakes. And I remember going home, my partner being there, and me bursting into tears the moment I walked through the door and saying, I'm going to lose my business and there's nothing I can do about it. No matter how hard I try, I'm failing at this and I can't win. And she looked at me and she smiled and she went, I knew this day would come. I knew you'd get upset, but you know what? It's just money. Don't worry about it. You will make that money back. Just breathe. And she came with me to my makeshift office that I had at the time, and she sat with me and she went, right, let's work on this. Let's make this work. And she still works for me today.
Wow.
And she actually supports me. Whenever I have a problem, I go straight to her and I scream at her and say, this is a big problem. And she goes, well, let's think about this. Let's think about this logically. So to answer your question, really, it was having that support kept me going forward.
Yeah.
And it made sure that I kept that mindset of that is the dream, and that dream will continue. I think if I didn't have the strength of my partner at the time, we wouldn't be having this conversation today.
Yeah. That's powerful. That's really powerful. I think that, a lot of people don't even talk about that. They want all the credit sometimes. It's like they don't talk about the support framework, just having, even if it's just friends or family, or if it's a partner, just helping you get back up on your feet, because sometimes your closest are the most able to do that for you. It's not just the people around you in business that can say, hey man, you get knocked down, you can get back up. You can watch a YouTube video or some stuff online about the grit that you need to have as being an entrepreneur, but the truth is that sometimes it's the people that know you personally. They know your weaknesses. They know your deep truth, that they can tell you, listen, I know why you're scared. And I know what we're scared about, because these are the things that we need to pay for and do in our lives. And this is how we're trying to shape our future. And this is why you need to continue.
Exactly. And that's hand on heart. That day was the defining moment for me of what type of boss I wanted to be as well. And I remember the staff making the mistake, and as soon as I saw the error, I just left the room I was in. It was a case of, I'm going to step away from the desk and step away from the office, and I'm going to go find that support I need. And wow, she was there, and she come with me, and just she sat in the middle almost of, this is the mistake, this is how we fix it, and we've never made the same mistakes again.
Do you feel like it was like almost her giving you permission to like execute? It's like you had this plan, you kind of convinced people to go along, but now this is the point where you've really met your first like obstacles, you've met your first challenges, and it's almost like, hang on a sec, do I need to step back because of the other people that are relying on me to be successful in this? And it's them almost giving you permission to say, no, now you've really got to stick in there.
I would say so. I think if she hadn't of done it that day and said what she did, if she had agreed with me that this was a mistake, I think I would have listened to her, and white flag would have gone up straight away of, this isn't going to work, and I would have folded.
Yeah.
But the fact that she stood there and, no, we can fix whatever the error is, we can make it work. That was it. She, as you say, she gave me that blessing to, you're going to make mistakes. If you didn't, you'd never learn. You'd never succeed.
Yeah.
And I think making the mistakes as early as I did gave me a lot to focus on. And I would say, yeah, it's all down to that inner circle of people that I have. I have another friend actually that he's not part of the business, but he understands my business inside and out. And the reason for that is because every Saturday at midday, I phone him. And we spend an hour on the phone, and I shout at him about every problem I've had for that week. He doesn't understand what they mean, but he tries to offer input, and I appreciate and love him for it. But it's more, I read somewhere, I can't remember where I read it, but it was, always have someone that's not part of the business that you can talk to about the business that can offer some advice. So yeah. I asked him to be that advice, and 9 times out of 10 he doesn't give any, but he just listens to the problem. And yeah, that's something that, well, I think without that I would never be able to do half of what I do. I would send some really evil, I think, messages to staff members in terms of, you've made a mistake, if I didn't have that soundboard to vent at. And yeah, I appreciate that inner circle, really do.
It gives you like a different perspective. Also, I find that whenever I do that, and I do have friends and family that I just chew their ear off. Like, hey, this is my problem. This is what I'm trying to do. And I can't get this thing to work. Especially when I start talking about like the software and stuff, like, and I start getting technical, and they're like, what the hell are you talking about? Who understands that? You're pooling data. You've got data pools and this and that. What the hell is a data pool? And so they're visualizing water. And I'm like, no, it's like, and so you kind of realize sometimes where I almost remember that Einstein quote, if you can't explain it simply enough, you don't understand it well enough. And then there's also like, so there's that kind of plays on me sometimes where I'm like, okay, well, if I can't get everybody to understand what my problems are, how am I going to fix it? Because if I can't even communicate it clearly, and then there's also, sometimes you just need to let your confusion out. It's like, you've just got a ton of problems. You've a lot of decisions that you need to make that you're not making. For whatever reason, because of finance, because of time constraints, because of just how comfortable you are with a certain direction. And sometimes it's just uncharted territory, and you're like, and it's kind of stressing you out. Even when it's not really that stressful, it's just stressing you out because of the sheer amount of decisions you have to make. And then so you want to dump them on somebody, and then you look at them looking at you wide-eyed, like, sometimes they think that they give you like, have you ever had a situation where they literally just tell you like the most simplest option? You're like, hang on a sec, why didn't I just do that in the first
I remember a staff actually the other day. I built our computer system that we use, and I created a new rule in it that archives old information, and they were trying to search it, and I said, oh, well, you got to undo this and undo that. And he went, well, why don't you just create a second page that does the archiving, that we can then search the archive but have the original? Why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
And now we've implemented that. But it was that, if he hadn't have come in that day, we would still be undoing what I had done to look in the archive. But it just took that really simple answer to go, that's a way of looking at things. Yeah. So yeah, I do have that quite often. Even with my friend that I talk to, sometimes I vent about stuff, and he goes, yeah, but why are you doing it like that? That won't work. Look at this.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So like,
yeah,
what? It's like, so you've gone from like the situation where you've kind of stepped on some toes, you've you have stepped on some toes. Like a
Oh
lot of
yes.
people would if they're in the same position. You're taking the skill and expertise that you've gained, and you've said, I'm going to go take this and build my own business. And we're effectively competitors now. Because
Yeah.
and the only people I know, by the way, are the people you know. So I'm a direct competitor. So,
Yeah, exactly that.
you know, and so that's that. So you kind of burnt that bridge, and now you've got someone that knows you just as well as you know them to a degree. And it's you've had your first massive obstacle, which is a legal kick in the shin, which has slowed you down financially. Now you're even more desperate to get some money through the door, but you've also got permission to continue, you know, and then you've also with your partner there, and then you've also got people around you that you've just mentioned that you grow as you've grown. You've got more people that you've kind of soundboarded off to help you kind of navigate the world of business. But what was your like when you were at that moment? Because I want to go back to that. When you were at that moment where you were given permission, but you had just spent most of your money, you haven't driven home any business yet. What did you do strategically? What were there any set steps that you did? Like, what was your like work ethic like? What did you have to do? Like,
So I was working I I was working from about 5 a.m. until about 9 p.m. every day, Monday to Sunday. I was doing accounts, invoicing at weekends for work that had been done the Monday prior, just to make sure that I could have some money coming in, doing credit control at weekends when you know you're not going to get an answer, but sending those emails out because that's the best time that you've got. And I was burning myself out, but I needed to keep the business functioning, and that's pretty much how I did it. I just worked every hour that I could. As well as that, I made some phone calls to people that I knew me, that weren't part of the competitors in a circle or anything like that, but people I could rely on to say I need help. And one of them happened to be my mentor from the very first job in the industry that I had. And I said, look, I've got these jobs coming in. Can you do it for me in my name? And
okay,
me just piggyback off the back of your service. And he said, yeah. And they charged me the lowest rate they possibly could so that I could charge a little more, so I could get some money in, but then take that headache off of me to make things move. So I just lent on a bit of kind of networking, but more people I knew that also had respect for the fact that I always said I would work for myself, and they really did help me get by while I was struggling.
so it's like you
And
joint ventured, like you kind of fell into a joint venture relationship or a strategic partnership. You kind of
oh
just
yeah, definitely.
I've seen companies do that. They build entire businesses off that kind of a relationship. Then they'll sell to customers. They won't have any skill in the area. What they'll do is they'll align themselves with companies that can deliver. And what they're doing is making their money on the margin.
Yeah.
It's I've seen that, and it's kind of that's really interesting. The fact that you've had to pivot, you've delivered against your customer. You've delivered on what you promised. So that's the main thing. You've got a happy customer. They did it in your name. That's brilliant. But I know that for you to get to that point, there's a gap here. There's a point where you had to get there. Like, so you've had to put in the hours, and what I'm getting at is the amount of outreach that you have to do.
Yeah, I spent days on phone calls with companies. I remember in the very beginning, 500 phone calls a day. That was my limit. I said I would make 500 phone calls a day to customers, both internal and external, trying to get new customers, get in old customers that I'd known for years, and also building those relationships, those partnerships of people that had links to other locations that didn't have the link that I had, so that I could do their bit, but actually it's being done by someone else. And I remember
Referral partners.
every I'm sorry.
How does that work? Are they like like you kind of use them as like referral partners?
Sort of, yeah. So I've still got a few partnerships in the same kind of manner, which is they don't have the link that I've got. So they go out and they get the client, and then they say, here, can you do it for me? Do it in my name in the same manner that I did in the beginning. And we do all the work in their name, and then they make money on the margin. And we networked out, and I'm actually in the process now of building an actual plan around that, because it worked. and
Oh
it
yeah,
worked
like
really well.
kind of, I call those like distribution networks and distribution channels. Like you're building, whether they brand themselves independently or whether you have your own brand. And that's interesting that
Yeah,
you mentioned that, because that's kind of like what I've done for such a long time. That's my business has been
yeah.
built around building those kind of relationships. And that's what you're doing now. Is that how you're
Yeah,
expanding?
so we've got the JT group as one company, and then I said, well, I can't pivot that way because of our policies and the way that we're aligned with. We work directly with food distributors and people like that, and we can't really change the way that works. So we're building another entity that can pivot that way, that is reliant on building those relationships with everyone that's in the same field so that we can support them and do exactly the same thing of support them as they grow and let them grow so they don't have to worry too much about the overheads in the beginning because as we touched on the money side of things, when you set up a company, some people think I've paid the £20 or whatever it is for company's house. I paid that. That's it. That's done. I've got a company. What they don't realize is it costs a lot of money to set up IT infrastructure. Everything costs a lot of money. And then a lot of suppliers, they see you as a new company. So all of a sudden, the costs go up even more because we can make some money off of this person. So what we did was we've built another thing around them to go, well, don't worry too much about that because we can support you. And we're actively doing that now, which is incredible that we're taking what was you could say a mistake in the beginning, and we're turning it into a positive kind of brand for people to learn from. Um, and I owe it all to making those simple errors that I've now looked at in a book and gone, do you know what? These errors can actually create future for new people.
Yeah. And you're in you mentioned food distributors.
Yeah.
So I take it, so you're in the, well, I know that you're in the business to business space, but like, do you ever work directly with consumers too?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we've got a lot. Our client book almost feels like I'm bragging a little bit. Our client book has over 5,000 people on it, and that ranges from Fortune 500 companies. I'm very proud of the links I've built there, and those links are thanks to software suppliers that I've worked with for years. That they've got their software into the companies, and the companies are asking for training on that software, and they've gone, well, we don't offer the training, but I know a guy that does.
Mm.
And then they've referred me to them, which is phenomenal. But on the other end of it, we work with everyday people that are moving products across borders, and we do personal effects. So let's say you're moving house, we can arrange for that stuff to be moved to whichever country it's going to.
I
We
feel like I
do
just
that
did
quite a bit.
I just worked with a US company. I feel like I should have known you like about 3 months ago. We moved from the US back to the UK, and I had to use a company, and they packaged everything up we moved an entire house, and so I
Wow.
had to deal with all these tour agreements and customs clearance.
Yeah, transfer of residence.
Yeah, that's it. We had to do all that, have it sit in customs for a couple of weeks before another company picked it up in the UK and brought it to
Yeah.
us. So yeah, I
They're
wish I,
painful forms.
yeah,
Painful forms.
yeah.
We do them on a regular basis, but yeah, transfer of residence forms. As soon as someone says I'm moving house, it's a case of when, because your house is going to be packed up for about 6 months.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with the stuff that you need every day?
And you guys can do,
But
yeah, and you do,
yeah,
because
we
those
do
forms,
that.
I did get those forms and they were a headache to look at. So,
Yeah.
all right, so if anyone's looking, they should just give you a shout.
Yeah, it's what we do. It's what we're good at, and
Yeah,
I've been doing it for companies going to and from Switzerland and Turkey, and so I understand the pain that people go through every day with that paperwork, and that's what we built the company on. Really, was we built it around three words: help, educate, and advise. And I love them words. The words themselves don't mean very much, but the bit behind it does, which is we help everyone that asks us for that help. If someone phones up and says, I'm trying to move goods and I don't know how to do it, we'll do what we can. If we can't do it, we'll say we can't do it, but we'll try everything. We'll educate and advise companies to the best of our ability. That's every single minute of every day. for me, that's from about 5 a.m. until about 7 or 8 p.m. that I will advise companies that phone me. And that we also do it internal as well. So every day the staff are learning something new, and we make sure that we educate them. I don't like using the word expert. People class me as an expert, but how I look at it is I'm just a student in the customs clearance field, and I like to learn, and I know that everyone that we have here also likes to learn. So we do push as much as we can, and that's one thing that I think helps us, is that every day something changes, and a lot of us go out of our way to learn it. A lot of companies, I find that you think you know your product, and you know it well because you've set up your own business in that product, but that product changes, and you've got to change with it, and you've got to learn that change, and you've got to learn it to a point where you can sell that change without thinking about it. So obviously, as soon as you said TOR, transfer of residence, that's the level that you have to know exactly what a person's going to say almost before they say it, to be able to teach it, to educate, advise people of it.
Instantly an authority then. Like, so if I ever had a question, I know that I'd rather go to you because I know that you know, and you knew it straight away. You didn't have to go away, research it, come back. It's I think the more you do something, the better you get at it. And if you're constantly learning, you're constantly, and you're running a business. So every day you're running, and I think people, it's important to recognize when you're running a business, you don't have a safety net. So you do have to learn, you do have to adapt to change, and you've got to be an expert of your industry. You absolutely have to. You've got to know it inside out, upside down, so that whenever you do end up having to speak to someone about it knowledgeably, you can, and you can do it right off the cuff. Even with a couple of beers in you. It's important to be able to do that, because that's how people are going to identify you. When I think of Tyler, I think of the JT group, I think of your expertise, first, because that's my interaction with you. And if that's how people, and that's what you're doing every day. If you're going out and your outreach, you said 500 calls a day. If you're hitting that kind of number, even if you've been able, and you've got to tell me, I think you said you were automating this to a degree where you're using partners. But there's still that many touch points happening per day, if not more. And so that's all kind of feeding back to you as a brand. But if not as a brand, it's at least the cogs in the machine, as the machine that delivers against the promise. Because even if it's under their brand, it's still your machine that's being sold. It's almost like when you're selling, I think it's like, is it Infinity cars in the US? When I was up there, I'm like, this is a Mercedes. Everything in here is a Mercedes. It's like it's another car wrapped around a Mercedes shell. And it's kind of like people recognize that where this is actually coming from, especially over time. And if you've got the long view in mind, then that's going to become more apparent over time.
And it's what I say to staff here sometimes when things go wrong. I say it's not you that's gone wrong, it's Tyler Townsend. It's me. It's my name that is the thing that's affected, because if the company collapses, you can get another job. Me, on the other hand, I'm the brand that collapsed.
You go down with the ship.
Exactly. As a good example, touching on kind of problems today, is Wilkinson or Wilco. They're collapsing, and straight away the Wilkinson family.
This is the razor blades, right?
No, so it's the discount hardware stores up and down the country.
I didn't even know.
They're filed administration, and they are shutting stores, and the family is affected by it because they share the name. Right. So for me, JT, T in JT is Townsend, my last name. So I'm affected by anything that happens that's wrong. So it's a case of saying to the staff that when a mistake happens, you're okay. I'm not okay though. But one thing that my partner told me I had to make sure I mentioned was about a year and a half ago, and I worked myself every day. I do now, and she thoroughly enjoys the fact that I go home with 3 mobile phones. I sleep with 2 mobile phones by my bedside, just in case there's a problem. I'm always available. I know exactly how some of these politicians that have emergency phones, I know exactly how they feel with 2 phones. But I worked myself every day, no matter what. And I remember doing everything. So payroll, VAT problems, everything you can think of fell on my lap. I had no support in terms of if the problem happened, I went down with the ship. And I always meant to have a team around me, but it was a case of I'm too busy to worry about that. I've got to get this done. And I sat on a call with a very old friend client of mine, and he said, "You don't look well at all." And I said, "I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm okay." And halfway through the call, I said, "Do you mind if we just cut the call off, because I'm really not feeling that great. I need to go to hospital." And I was in and out of hospital for 4 days because I had burnt myself out to the point where doctors were extremely concerned for my health, where I wasn't eating correctly. I was just completely dehydrated, malnourished, because I was working constantly.
How many people were in your business at that time?
I had 8 staff that worked for me full time. I had a couple of part timers as well, but it was a case of I was doing everything I could to make sure that they had everything they needed, as well as making every phone call I possibly could, taking every burden on. And I remember sitting down at home. My doctor said, "You need to take at least one day off." He said, "I'd like you to take a week off." And I said, "Well, that's never going to happen. But promise me one day, take one day off." So I took one day off. I remember sitting at home and saying to myself, I need support around me. Otherwise I'm going to kill myself. And it's because of the business. And I then implemented a board of directors because I knew I needed that support. But it was offloading some of the areas of the business onto different people that knew what they were doing and could say, "I can do that." And she wanted me to mention that because it's the one thing that, yeah, it is. And I say that to people all the time, is that it's important to know where your limitations are. It's also important to know when to hold your hands up and say, "I cannot do this. I can't go any further." And I didn't. I just wanted to keep going. And it almost ended me. And my doctor, anytime we take the day, he said, "Because you're no good to anyone. If you go down now, there is no contingency. That means those 8 people that rely on you have all lost their jobs because there is no contingency."
Yeah.
So what are you going to do? Are you going to take the day off knowing that they'll be supported? So I did, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to work. I wanted to go back to work. I was planning to go back to work after I saw the doctor, but I took the day.
So this is your steps to say, I guess, I mean, I've been in the same spot. I think a lot of people who started companies who are watching this, if they've gotten to the point where it's not really about the money at this point, it's really just about when your process and your operations get to the point where you just, in the early days, you can wear a lot of hats and you can burn through the evenings and weekends, but there comes a point where the degree of like expertise that's required to complete certain tasks, even though you can still do it, even though you can still do the invoices and the bookkeeping, even though you can still deal with the sales calls and follow-up calls and even the closing of deals, even though you can do all the marketing and micromanage certain things, even though all those things, because as an entrepreneur, as a business startup person, you do learn all those things. And it's not that you're, I guess, almost like a jack of all trades, master of none. That line, I've been told that before, and that does not apply. It's really like the captain of the ship. Yes, you understand every role. Yes, you can do every role, but it's not your place to do every role.
Exactly that. I remember saying that to my partner, because I brought her in at that point as my operations manager to manage the team so that I could concentrate on what I was good at. And we moved to a new office, and she's got her own office, and she does other things for the business. And I said to her, "You can't steer the ship from the engine room."
Yeah.
And she doesn't understand that phrase, but it is simple, isn't it? It is a case of in order to captain the ship, you can't be the engineer. You can't be doing the job because you can't see what you're doing. And you're doing more harm than anything else. And most of that harm is to you and all those around you that are supporting you, that are working for you. So it was a hard lesson to learn, but it was needed. And the fact that there were people around me saying, you need to go to hospital because something is not right.
Yeah,
And
that's scary, especially when like this is where your loved ones are like, well, you're doing well. Were you doing like financially? Were you doing well at this point? Were you
I
growing?
was, yeah, we were growing, everything seemed to work, but it was just,
It's like that
I'd
catch
say
22. It's
not
like,
enough.
yeah,
It was enough to be happy and the business was working, but it wasn't enough for me to be able to go, the business can function without,
yeah,
and it can work because every day something different happened that was, oh, I'll do that. I'll just hand it here. I'll sort that out. Whereas what I should have done is go, how would you fix it? Go and fix it. If you can't fix it, then come back.
yeah.
I didn't do any of that. I just give it in. I've got room for another spinning plate. It's fine. I can do more. Whereas now there are managers in departments. There are people that are capable of doing those things without me getting involved. Holidays as well. I all the way through that year we were very fortunate to be able to go on a few holidays. My work laptop, my work phone came with me, and for most of the holidays, I was working. Now, as
Mm.
much as I have a really supportive family and they understood I had to do certain things like HR problems, I had to address them. But it was the watching everyone else have fun while I sat back and I had to work.
I've
And
done that plenty of times. Like I'll stay in
it's
the hotel
awful.
room while the family goes to the pool because I have to be on a call or I have to fix a problem or I have to send a special email somewhere.
Yeah.
Or something that requires attention that no one else can do. And you
Yeah. And
that's when you start to realize I've got to start delegating. I need to trust in the people that I hire. And there's a couple of things that come into that. Like I think obviously you're developing a lot. Like you are as a human, as a person becoming the captain, you know, from having the small little boat now it's getting bigger and you've got all these other
oh yeah.
responsibilities. Like you are developing as a person. So like, what did you like? There's a couple of questions that are starting to come to mind, like in terms of how you started to. You've said you've delegated. You got other people in position or elevated their position to take on more responsibility. What other things, or if that was it, fair be it, so be it. Like, what other things did you do to kind of like, I guess, automate or
Yeah.
streamline certain elements of your business to actually free you up the burden of concern? You know?
So a lot of things that we did at that point. So I do a lot of the tech side of the business, making sure computers work, and we outsourced it straight away to a reliable local company because it was a case of I can do it, I can manage it, but they're the experts, and I can just phone them up and go, it's broken, and they can take it over. But internal, we implemented a lot of robotic processing. So we brought in systems that could take a lot of the work that people did away from them, but not as in a way take it away. It was more, it could free them up to be able to learn more and to be able to do that a little bit more. That meant that I didn't have to keep showing them everything. And we implemented that pretty much around the same time, and we still use it today. And it does,
When you
I'd say
say
about
robotics,
85%. Yeah.
like I'm sorry, I'm thinking like robot arm. Like when you say robotics, are you talking the systems?
System. So
Okay. I visualize a shipping container and just like things happening. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what everyone else. That's what everyone else thinks is that I've got robots actually in the corner of the room tapping away. No, it's like cloud robots
Got it.
that literally sit behind the person almost, and the person does a little bit, and then a robot does the hard work of the actual information, and we implemented them because what was happening was every day the staff were doing their bit and then I was double checking everything had gone through correctly. Well, now that's what the robot does. I say about 85% of what the staff do every day, it goes through these robotic processes, including invoicing and bookkeeping. So we took that element away from me. We've got accounts managers and things like that in place, but to free up a lot of their time, because what I looked at was as much as I'm freeing up my time, I'm dumping this stuff on other people, which
Right.
means that the stress I've been under, they're going to be under eventually. So we put in safety nets so that everyone had that more relaxed environment. So we automated as much as we possibly could, and we're still to this day looking at we've partnered with the local universities, and we are building more automation through their project teams. So we're getting students to come in to help us build for the future so that we can free up more time for staff.
So if you were to like, so you've obviously gone through this process of like doing everything yourself, everything's on your shoulders. You've gotten to the point where you've streamlined a few aspects of your company with, I guess, distribution, and you've got a couple of people help taking on more responsibility. I feel like you've taken it to the next level now, where you're now bringing on almost like apprenticeship yourself, like students, you're saying. So if someone was like just starting out in business and they were looking to kind of follow a similar trajectory, but you were to give them some advice on the automation side or streamlining, like what would that be? Would it just be to start it earlier, or like, do you have to go through it? Do you have to go through the mud?
So what I've always said, I was actually asked this recently by another company, and they said, when would you look at automation? And I said, I would look at it as early as possible, but also as late as possible. What I mean by that is, if you are doing something every day that's the same, then you know that can be taught to processing systems.
Yeah.
Do it. But always, we run the business in such a way where we have this constant cap, which is the staff get to that point where they're under pressure, and then we implement more automation in the system. Then we push them back up to that level, and then we do it again and again and again. And we do it every day now, so that we know that the staff are always doing what they need to do, the bare minimum they need to do in order to be comfortable, but also they're being supported. So I would say, if you want to automate, you could fully automate what we do. The problem is that legislation tells you you're not allowed, but we could do that in a heartbeat. But if you're going to go down that route, you've got to know what you're doing. You've got to understand to a point where you can do it without thinking. So I have staff that come to me to say, I have this problem, and I will just go, I can tell you exactly where your problem is.
Okay.
And you have to know your product and what you're doing to that level to be able to say, I can automate this. Otherwise, all you're going to do is put more work on your team to be able to fix what the automation can't do.
So you've got to grind. You've got to do it.
Yeah.
What you're saying, you've got to do it. You've got to factor in
automation.
You've got to put in systems to make you more efficient, but you still have to do the work. Not everything's
got to get in the trenches.
Yeah. Okay. I guess where I'm at is we haven't spoken about, I guess, one of the things, and this is really where I like to pivot and talk about like personal development.
Yeah.
And we've gotten to the point where it's like, okay, so you've built this business. You built this business and you're going to keep on doing it. You're going to keep on growing. But initially, when you actually got out of your day-to-day job, you switched into business. Was it because of money? Or I know you mentioned you're making money for everybody else, but was it really, and you answer this however you want, was it really the money that you were chasing, or was it you like an empowerment of you actually just doing something for yourself or creating a legacy? Like what was your main motivator for actually, what was the one that actually drove you to take that step? Was it chasing money? Was it a contract? Because some people do it based on a contract. I've seen them do it. Like they'll negotiate a deal with a client, and they'll realize it's a really big contract, and they'll quit the company they're working for and then quickly wrap a business around this one deal they're about to do. I've seen people do that and then build successful businesses off the back of that. But then there's also many others that will say, especially if it's in the same space as what they work in, it's like, no, I'm doing this because I believe I could do better in this world, or it's because it's a personal thing. It's I feel better being the boss. I feel better being in charge of my own destiny.
I would say it's a bit of everything, really. Okay. So I do not chase money. I've never chased money at all. For me, the money is a byproduct of my experience. So I've had the pleasure of working with prime ministers. I've had the pleasure of working with some really fantastic organizations and brands. That for me is part of it. I'm able to do that in my name, which means that what these people are getting is me. They're not getting a company that I represent. They're getting me. So the personal recognition, I'd say, is second to none. It has to be the highest thing for me. The other thing is, I'm not someone that goes out there, I'm the boss. I've never done that either, but I couldn't work for someone else. So it
Yeah.
was, I want to build something that's my name. So I've got one fear in life, and that's being forgotten. And that's, I've had friends, I imagine everyone that watches this would have friends and family that passed away. And there comes a point where you forget what they look like. You forget what they sounded like when they talked to you, or forget things that they did. But there's one defining thing about them that you remember, one memory that will stick with you for a lifetime. And I've always said that the biggest fear I have is not having that, not having carved my way in life. So I know that the company I've built hopefully outlives me, and people remember the guy that made it, because then I know I've done what I've set out in life to do, which is build something for the future.
Yeah. And
That for me is it.
this is legacy building.
Yeah.
This is really, and a lot of people, I mean, I know that's one of my primers when it came into business. It wasn't just chasing money. I mean, that was a big part of it. I think a lot of people go in there first looking at it through that lens. But I think once you start to realize how difficult it can be, you need other things. You do need like permission, support from your family, friends, people that you love and who are close to you. I think you need the market to give you permission too, by giving you a few deals, especially when you put some work in. And I think ultimately though, what will get you through like the hard conversations if it's ever legal, or if it's ever to do with even just dealing with taxes, even just dealing with the nitty-gritty stuff that can make earning money just seem so boring. Like where, I always say this, there are plenty of jobs out there that will pay you a lot of money, and there are plenty of causes out there that will do good to the world that you can join and become part of. But when you're in business, a lot of the time, when you really start cutting through, it is down to legacy. It's down to what your end goal is, and how you want to be known and remembered. I think that's a big part. And
my staff, we had a management meeting earlier on today, and we went through the anticipated end of year turnover, and they said the number, and I went, that's good. They said, are you not impressed? I said, I am, but it's a number on a piece of paper to me. It means nothing. It doesn't. Fantastic, brilliant. Let's climb to the top of the roof and shout it out to the world, but it means nothing. What that means is I've got a future for another year that I can invest in the people I have around me to better their lives. So yeah, there are times where the money's great, it's good, fantastic, great. I can support my family and
need it. It's a lifeblood to business. We live in a capitalist society, like we need the money to be there. So like, I mean, in terms of your business growth, like how do you see it going now? Like now that you have all this experience behind you, where do you see it going with that knowledge base, with that foundation now that you have?
So if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have said I'm going to coast, and I'm just going to ride out the next few years and I'll be happy. And the reason why I say a year ago is because
was that COVID?
COVID made
survive life in business.
Well, pretty much. COVID made life very difficult for us. But I say that then, and we look at today, and we go, we've done 300% more since in a year.
Wow.
From then, and that's down to the determination of the team to keep up with me. I think half the time, because every day I go to them and say, I've got a fantastic idea, I've got this really good idea of what we're going to do, and I've made a change to this, and they go with it, but they try to keep up, I think. And I see the company growing and expanding quicker than I wanted to, but only because there's a need for it. And I think when the day comes that the company stops growing and stops expanding is the day where I would say, hang up the keys almost, of just, it's not my job anymore. I think that'll be the day where I step back and finally have a little bit of a break, but I don't see that for at least 10 years. I see 10 years of just growth and keeping things going.
Do you ever like, are you over that 10-year, like would you start to restructure the company so it will be something that's looked at? Well, you said legacy, right?
Yeah.
I'll ask you this question. That this is something that's just come to mind. Would you position the company so that it is still owned by you, your family, but is run without you, or are
Yes.
you position it as a sale to be sold off?
No.
For an
So I got asked 6 months ago, would you ever sell the business? And I said, nope. I would sell the business as a book if it was no longer viable and someone wanted to buy the asset, buy the asset. But all the while I am steering the ship. It's my ship. And that's how I've always said it to everyone. And the aim, I want to have an office in Ireland. I want to have an office in France, one in Germany, one in the US actually, in Tennessee is where I've always said I wanted it to be. I don't know why. I like Tennessee, so I've always said I want to have an office there. And I think once it gets to that point and it's structured that way, I would step away from being the CEO. I would become just the chairman, and I would allow the business to be run by those that can run it better than I can. Because I admit that very early on in my career is that I'm not a very good managing director. And that's because they don't teach you how to be a managing director. You just have to learn. So I know I'm a bad boss, but that's because I don't know how to be a boss.
Yeah.
So I would say is the moment I can stop being a boss and I can hire people to do that, I will step back and I will enjoy life. And I say that now, but give it a few years and it will be a case of, are you going to do it? Probably not. I don't think I could ever give up the work phone or the work laptop. I'm a bit of a workaholic, so.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I feel like when it comes to like appointing a managing director, when you think you kind of realize that you're not the best manager. You could study being an MD, you can do an MBA, you can go through the whole education system, learning how to be the best. But then when you're really super qualified as a potential managing director, and then you go and start up a company that's tiny, like all the principles that you've learned do not apply. So,
Yes.
So when you end up getting reconditioned as an entrepreneur, a startup person who builds a business, and then by the time you get to the point where you need to become the MD, a lot of the time it's way better just to bring someone else in. Even if you still want to wear the hat as an MD, you still probably need to hire someone with MD experience as your operations to give you to kind of tell you what to do, especially when it comes to HR, especially when it comes to scaling the company, positioning it to take on larger contracts, how you're going to deliver and execute against larger contracts. And I've had to certainly learn those, but it's a rocky road to get there. And I think you've explained the journey really well. If you had to give like a couple of, or if it was just one thing, or maybe it's a few things, if you wanted to tell like the person sitting at their desk right now who's probably in a job similar to how you started, they don't really want to be there anymore. It's not because they're unfulfilled in life. It's more, I'm talking to the person who actually wants to start their own company, who's probably scouring the internet, looking at all the ads and commercials out there of people selling and promoting how to start a company, how to get into business, buy my online course, go and open a Shopify account or various other different things. I mean, some of those companies are viable, but I'm talking to the person that's kind of looking out there, looking for opportunities, does have a skill set, is working. What would you tell them to do if they were to follow a similar trajectory?
Leap without looking.
Leap without looking.
Do it. Just do it. And the only way you're ever going to know if it's doable is by doing it yourself. And my business partner, he had a similar scenario recently where he was asking almost for permission to do something. And I knew it was viable. He knew it was viable, but he just didn't have the ability to just go for it. And it was a case of, if you don't do it, I'll do it for you, because you can do it. And it worked. The process is now working. So I would say just leap without looking. And if you've got something that you know you can do and you can do well, and you know you can turn it into a business, you've got to really know you can do it. Go for it. But be prepared for a few rounds in the ring of making mistakes. And be prepared to admit your mistakes. Because if you don't admit it, you'll never learn. And not only will you never learn, you'll become arrogant, and you won't be able to sit there and go, I made that mistake and I learned from it. and only. I have made thousands of mistakes in the 3 years I've been at the helm of my own business. And I know that those mistakes define who I am. And one of the biggest mistakes was not having support. And I would advocate for support straight away. If you're going to set up on your own, build that support structure before you do it. Because if you do it afterwards, you've already failed.
All right. Get it. Set your foundation right.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we'll end it there. That's great. Appreciate your time, man.
No worries.
For everybody that's been watching, like and subscribe. There's more like this coming. Tyler, it's been a pleasure.
It has indeed. Thank you very much for having me on board.